Jungkook is heartbroken. Jimin hugs him and whispers the promise that made him rise, fire. You weren't supposed to see that. The gunshot was still echoing in Jungkook's ears as he stumbled back, blood on his shirt, though none of it was his. The nightclub's red strobe lights pulsed like a heartbeat gone wild, bathing everything in fevered urgency. Smoke curled around his boots. Screams reverberated from the hallway, some real, some only inside his head. Behind him, the shattered remains of trust lay bleeding on the velvet floor. Jungkook's breath hitched. His phone buzzed in his pocket again and again, but he didn't move. Couldn't. His world had frozen at the sight of Taehyung's lifeless eyes. And the last thing he'd heard before the shot, Jimin's voice calling his name, too late. He stood in the aftermath, motionless. 23 years old and already hollowed out like something ancient and forgotten. Then came the warmth. Arms around his shoulders, slow and steady. A hand pressing the back of his neck, grounding him. Jimin didn't say anything at first. He just held him. And it was that silence, intentional, unwavering, that finally cracked Jungkook's armor. He fell. Not physically, not yet, but something in him gave out. A silent sob trembled through his chest. Jimin caught it like he always did. You're not alone, Jimin whispered, his breath warm against Jungkook's ear. Not tonight, not ever again. The club was now a memory, swallowed in chaos. Sirens in the distance, footsteps running. But in the shadowed corner where they hid, it was only the two of them, fractured, still breathing, suspended between what had been and what would come next. Jungkook wanted to speak, but guilt pressed his throat shut. He had loved Taehyung, maybe not enough, maybe too much, maybe in the wrong way, and now he was gone, because of him, because of all of this. Jimin tightened the hug, and then softly, so softly it felt like a prayer, he said, I made a promise to you, the night the fire didn't take us. You remember it. Jungkook couldn't answer. His mind was a whirlwind, his lips trembled, but he remembered. He remembered the smoke, the collapsing walls, the way Jimin had carried him out, coughing blood and ash. The moment their hands found each other in the dark, that was the first time Jimin had whispered it. I'll keep you breathing, Jimin had said, even if you forget how. And now, in the aftermath of something even worse, Jimin whispered it again. I'll keep you breathing. A tear broke loose from Jungkook's eye, sliding down his cheek like molten glass. He didn't deserve Jimin. But he needed him. Their lives had never been simple, raised in silence, shaped by shadows. Their dance crew had once been the only thing that felt pure, until fame crept in, slow and poisonous, until money tangled with trust, until the choices they made became irreversible. And still, Jimin stayed. Jungkook shook, whether from shock or grief or the cold truth setting in, he couldn't tell. But Jimin didn't let go, not even when the police burst through the entrance, not even when they were dragged outside and separated under screaming lights. Jimin kept his eyes on him always. That night, Jungkook didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling in the interrogation room, fingers curled around nothing. They hadn't charged him yet, but they would. They always did. The door opened. It was Jimin. How had he gotten in? Jungkook sat up, startled, but Jimin only smiled softly and closed the door behind him. No cameras for 5 minutes, he said. I made sure of it. Then he knelt in front of Jungkook, grabbed his shaking hands, and looked him in the eyes with something fierce, something unbreakable. You can die later, Jimin said, voice like fire wrapped in silk. But not now, not like this, you hear me. Jungkook blinked, dazed. Why? Because you owe me a final dance, one where you're not broken. Jungkook laughed, or cried, maybe both. Outside, the city forgot them. The headlines would twist their names by morning. The world would pick sides. But in that moment, messy, raw, real, Jungkook leaned into Jimin's shoulder, inhaled the scent of sweat and lavender soap, and nodded once. A promise returned. He wasn't sure how to forgive himself, but he believed Jimin could teach him how. And in that quiet space between breath and memory, something inside him flickered back to life. You lied to me. Jungkook's voice was low, like a wire pulled too tight, on the verge of snapping. His fists were clenched, knuckles white, as he paced the dim rehearsal room like a storm looking for something to destroy. Sweat dripped from his jawline, shirt soaked from hours of mindless dancing, of trying to outrun the guilt clawing at his insides. Jimin stood near the mirror, his reflection fractured by the cracked glass. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He just stared at Jungkook with that maddening, unreadable gaze, the one that used to feel like safety and now felt like a riddle that led nowhere. "I didn't lie," Jimin said carefully. "I chose not to tell you, that's different." "Bullshit." Jungkook slammed his fist against the wall, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. "You knew what Taehyung was planning, and you let me walk into that room." Jimin looked away, his jaw tightening. "I didn't know it would go that far." Jungkook let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to remember who I am," Jimin snapped, his voice rising. "I expect you to trust that if I could have stopped it, I would have. But you were already slipping away from me, Jungkook. You think I didn't see it." Jungkook's silence was an answer in itself. He turned his back to Jimin, pressing his forehead to the cool wall. The city lights outside flickered through the broken blinds, casting stripes of gold across the dance studio's worn floor. He felt like he was standing in a cage made of everything he used to love: music, movement, rhythm, and Jimin. "What was he blackmailing you with?" he asked quietly, like the question itself could crumble them. Jimin hesitated. "That night, Taehyung said something before the shot. He said, 'You should ask Jimin why he never sings anymore.'" Jungkook turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "So I'm asking." Jimin exhaled, and for the first time in weeks, his facade cracked. "I lost someone," he said. "Before the fire, before all of this, he was my brother, and he was silenced by the same people who funded our debut." Jungkook froze. The weight of the revelation crashed over him like a tidal wave. "What?" "I stayed quiet to protect you, and Taehyung found out. He said he'd leak the footage. Footage I never even saw, said he'd make it look like we knew, like we helped cover it up. I didn't know how far he'd go. I didn't know," his voice broke. "I just didn't want to lose you." The room pulsed with silence. Jungkook stepped forward, eyes brimming. "You should have told me. I didn't know if you'd choose me, or the truth." Jungkook grabbed Jimin's wrist, not roughly, but with desperation. "Don't ever say that again. Don't ever make me choose between you and the truth. I'll always choose both." Jimin looked up at him, even now. Jungkook didn't answer with words. He pulled Jimin into a kiss that was full of fury and ache and unfinished stories. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was raw and broken, like both of them. But it was real. When they pulled apart, breathless, Jimin rested his forehead against Jungkook. "Then help me finish what he started," he whispered. Jungkook nodded slowly. "We burn it all down. Every lie, every name, every studio exec who thought we were just pretty faces to profit off of." "But we don't become them," Jimin said. "We don't kill, we expose." "Fine," Jungkook muttered. "But if someone tries to silence us again—" "They won't." Jimin's voice was cold now, sure, "because I've already started." Jungkook blinked. Started what? Jimin pulled out his phone and tapped something. A few seconds later, a video began to stream. Not just any video. It was the moment Taehyung confessed. His voice distorted, but his words crystal clear. "I was told to do it, to frame Jimin, to break Jungkook, and if I didn't, I'd be next." Jungkook staggered back. "You recorded that?" Jimin nodded. "He didn't know I had a mic stitched into my sleeve. He never saw it coming." Jungkook stared at him. "And what now?" "We leak it," Jimin said. "But not until we know who's behind the curtain. We burn their mask first." A chill ran down Jungkook's spine. He looked at Jimin like he was seeing him for the first time. "You're not the same." Jimin smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Neither are you." Outside, a storm cracked across the sky. Inside, two souls began preparing for war, with the industry that made them, the ghosts that haunted them, and the truth that might destroy them both. And for the first time in a long time, Jungkook felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. hope laced with vengeance. "You're being watched," Namjoon said as he slid into the booth across from Jungkook, the vinyl seat groaning beneath him. His voice was calm, too calm, like he already knew something terrible was going to happen. Jungkook didn't flinch. He stirred his coffee without looking up. "Since when?" Namjoon's eyes scanned the late-night diner, pupils flickering like radar. "Since before Taehyung died. They knew you two were close. Too close. Close enough that he might have told you something you weren't supposed to hear." Jungkook finally met his gaze. "Did he?" A pause, then softly, "Did he tell you about Project Odette?" The name sent a shiver down Jungkook's spine. He had heard it once, on a night when Taehyung had drunk too much, talked too fast, and then gone terrifyingly silent, like he'd realized he'd crossed a line just by speaking. It had sounded like a code name, a myth, something dark and theatrical. "Odette was never a song," Namjoon continued. "It was a cover." Jungkook's hands trembled under the table. Namjoon lowered his voice. "They used our tour, our rehearsals, hell, even our comeback schedules, all to move things. People, money, secrets. Jimin's brother, he tried to leak it, so they buried him. Literally." Jungkook felt the floor tilt under him. "Why didn't you stop it?" "I tried," Namjoon said quietly. "I went quiet for a year, remember? That wasn't for mental health. I was locked in a hospital that wasn't really a hospital, because I asked too many questions." Jungkook's mouth went dry. "So you knew this whole time?" "I knew enough, but you," Namjoon leaned closer. "You're the last piece. They think you're a liability now." The bell above the diner door jingled. Jungkook instinctively looked up. It was Jimin. No disguise, no hesitation. He walked to the booth, slid in next to Jungkook, and fixed Namjoon with a stare so sharp it could have cut glass. "If you're here to help, help. If you're here to manipulate, walk out now." Namjoon's expression didn't change. "I'm here because we're running out of time." Jimin turned to Jungkook. "Did you tell him?" "I didn't need to," Jungkook said. "He already knows." Jimin's jaw tensed. "Then we move. Now we're not safe." Namjoon exhaled through his nose. "You're being followed. I tailed the guy who tailed you. He's parked outside. Black Audi, tinted windows." Jimin pulled out a flash drive from his jacket and slid it across the table to Namjoon. "This has everything I've gathered. Names, money trails, messaging logs. If we go down, this leaks to the press." Namjoon hesitated. "You trust me?" "I trust your fear more than your loyalty," Jimin said. "You're too scared to stay silent now." Jungkook stood abruptly. "Then let's make them scared too." But it was too late. The diner windows exploded. Glass rained down in chaos. The force of the blast threw Jungkook backward, his ears ringing, the world reduced to smoke and screams. He landed hard, ribs cracking against the floor as people shouted and scattered. Jimin was already on his feet, pulling him up. His lip was bleeding. "Move." Namjoon stumbled behind them, coughing. "They're here. They're not waiting anymore." They ducked out the back into the alley, headlights flooding the space seconds later. A voice called out in Korean, firm, rehearsed. "Stop. You're under surveillance authority. Come with us." Jungkook paused, something in the voice. He turned and saw her. Min Seojin, their former creative director. Wearing black combat gear, gun drawn. "You," he breathed, "you're with them." Her face showed no emotion. "I warned Jimin years ago. I told him to stop digging. You didn't listen." "Why the hell are you doing this?" Jimin shouted. She tilted her head. "Because truth doesn't sell records, but illusions do." Then she fired. The bullet missed on purpose, a warning. But it was enough to make them run. They disappeared into the night, Jungkook limping, blood soaking his side, Jimin dragging him toward a hidden stairwell that led underground. Namjoon stayed behind, not out of sacrifice, but choice. "You need a mole on the inside," he had said. "Let them take me." Jungkook hadn't agreed. Jimin had refused. But Namjoon had already stepped into the light. Now below the city, in a forgotten train tunnel where dust and memory clung to every brick, Jungkook collapsed to the ground. Jimin tore open his shirt. A graze, No major damage, but the blood was real. Jimin wiped it with shaking hands. "You're not dying," he muttered. "Not like this." Jungkook grabbed his wrist. "Tell me we're not losing." Jimin didn't answer. He just kissed his forehead and whispered, "We haven't started yet." But behind his eyes, the terror lived. They were no longer chasing truth. Now truth was hunting them. "You shouldn't have survived." The words echoed inside the underground train tunnel, cold and jagged like the rusted rails beneath their feet. The voice didn't come from Jimin or Jungkook. It came from the darkness. They spun around. From the shadowed mouth of the tunnel emerged Yoongi. His face was gaunter than Jungkook remembered, like something had been carved out of him, piece by piece, over time. He walked slowly, deliberately, as if each step carried weight he no longer wanted to bear. Jungkook stepped forward, blood still drying on his skin, eyes narrowed. "Yoongi, you're supposed to be dead." Yoongi smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Aren't we all?" Jimin didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at him, his breath shallow, as though he were seeing a ghost not entirely welcome. "You faked it," Jungkook's voice cracked. "Taehyung's funeral, he cried for you." "Taehyung cried for the idea of me," Yoongi said, "not the reality." Jimin finally found his voice. "Where the hell have you been?" Yoongi looked at Jimin, not with hatred, not even with regret, with pity. "Cleaning up the pieces you left behind." "You abandoned us," Jimin snapped. "No," Yoongi said, stepping into the light. "I disappeared so you two could live long enough to understand what you were actually a part of." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, a metal cylinder, no longer than a lipstick tube. He tossed it toward Jimin, who caught it reflexively. "What is it?" Jungkook asked, tension tight in his throat. "A data shard," Yoongi said. "Encrypted, Project Odette in its rawest form. Names, victims, transactions, surveillance footage, offshore accounts. You leak that, you burn down half the music industry." Jimin didn't breathe. "You had this all this time," he said, voice trembling. "Why didn't you?" "Because I had to choose," Yoongi interrupted. "Between vengeance and your lives." He looked directly at Jungkook. "They wanted you broken. They wanted Jimin erased. They wanted to turn you into marketing icons with no soul. You were the perfect vessel, beautiful, loyal, hungry." Jungkook felt like vomiting. Jimin tossed the shard back toward Yoongi, and it clattered on the floor. "You don't get to play martyr." "You still don't get it," Yoongi snapped. "You think they just killed your brother, Jimin? That was the prologue, Taehyung, a warning shot. This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us." Jungkook looked between them, his mind fracturing. "So what, we just die quietly?" "No," Yoongi said. "You dance. One last time, but not for the cameras, not for fans, for them." He knelt down and picked up the shard. "They're planning a swan finale. A global farewell show, streamed live, all 7 of you reunited. They'll pretend it's a comeback. But it's not. It's the culling." "What the hell are you saying?" Jimin whispered. Yoongi looked at him, and for the first time he looked scared. "You go on that stage, you don't come off it alive." Jungkook took a step back. The silence was louder than any scream. "But why?" he finally asked. "Why kill us, why now?" "Because too many of you know too much," Yoongi said. "And because killing you will make them richer than ever. Tragedy sells more than talent." Jimin fell against the wall, his knees threatening to give. "And our fans. They'll mourn you, idolize you, and forget the truth." Jungkook wanted to scream. Instead, he said, "We go public now." Yoongi's expression hardened. "The second you do, you'll be hunted openly." "Good," Jungkook spat. "Let them come." Jimin turned to him, eyes wide. "You're not thinking straight." "I've never thought clearer," Jungkook said. "They built us into machines. Let's become the virus that tears them down." Yoongi slowly nodded. "Then we need one more person." Jungkook frowned. "Who?" "Seokjin." Jimin froze. "He left the country." "No," Yoongi said with the ghost of a smile. "He was taken 2 years ago. He's been off-grid ever since." "But I know where they're holding him." Jungkook stepped forward. Then we get him back. Jimin shook his head. This is suicide. No, Jungkook said. This is ballet. They all turned to him. He met their gaze with fire in his blood. Swan Lake ends in death, but it begins in defiance. Let's give them an ending they'll never forget. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Jimin reached for his phone and said, I'm calling Hoseok. His voice was steady now. If we're going to dance, we'll need choreography, the kind that draws blood. Yoongi looked at Jungkook one last time. You've changed. So have you. No, Yoongi said quietly. I died, you just learned how to live. And beneath the city, in a place the world forgot, 3 ghosts began plotting resurrection. You want me to choreograph a revolution? Hoseok's voice cracked with something between disbelief and rage as he paced the rooftop, cigarette burning between his fingers, an old habit he'd sworn he quit. The wind tugged at his coat, the night heavy with rain clouds that hadn't decided whether to fall or hold back. The skyline burned in neon silence behind him, soul unaware of the war that was about to detonate beneath its feet. Yes, Jimin said calmly, but not a revolution they can see coming. Jungkook leaned against the rusted rail, eyes still bloodshot from the explosion 2 nights ago, the weight of betrayal tightening his spine. We don't need a show, we need a message. Every step, every breath, we tell them we remember. Hoseok scoffed. You remember. I'm the one who had to bury that memory. I disappeared for a reason, Jimin. Jimin stepped forward. And I'm asking you to come back for one. Hoseok stared at him like he was looking at a brother and a ghost at the same time. You're out of your mind. Probably, Jimin admitted. But you taught me once, movements matter more than words, so let's speak in the only language they can't censor. A pause. Hoseok's hand trembled as he put out the cigarette against the rail. If I do this, he said slowly, if I make this piece, it won't be pretty, it'll be honest. We're done being pretty, Jungkook muttered. We're done being perfect. Hoseok gave a bitter laugh. And what do you plan to do with this honesty? Broadcast it on national TV. Hope the viewers decipher your cryptic pirouettes while sipping their coffee. Jimin didn't blink. We'll hijack the finale. Hoseok's breath caught. The Swan Show. They're planning to kill us during it, Jungkook said. The silence that followed was total. Not even the wind dared to move. They won't do it publicly, Hoseok whispered. They'll stage it, Jimin said. Make it look like a tragic accident, a collapse, a stage malfunction. The whole world will cry and never question the headline. They already rehearsed the script, Jungkook added. We saw it. The memorial clip is ready. They're going to spin our deaths into legend, eternal, untouchable, perfect. Fuck, Hoseok breathed. Jimin reached into his pocket and pulled out a torn, wrinkled notebook, the one his brother had scribbled into before his death. Pages of symbols, phrases, and timing codes. My brother knew this day was coming. He mapped it out in movement. I've been decoding it for years. Hoseok took it, his fingers trembling as he flipped through. These aren't just steps, he murmured. This is choreography of confession, time to lights, sound, screens. This is weaponized performance. It's the only way, Jimin said. We give them the dance they want, but we bury the truth in the middle of it. We reveal everything live before they can stop us. Jungkook stepped forward, and if we die in the process, at least we go telling the truth. Hoseok's jaw clenched. Then we do it right. They rehearsed in silence beneath a parking garage deep in Gangnam, where the air smelled of oil and forgotten things. Broken mirrors leaned against cracked concrete. The only light came from a dying strip of fluorescence overhead. Jungkook bled during the second day, ankle twisted, skin split. He didn't stop. Jimin danced until his lungs begged for mercy. Hoseok shouted, threw his jacket across the room, ripped pages, rebuilt. Yoongi watched, sometimes correcting, sometimes whispering to himself. They built something feral, something divine. On the 5th day, Jungkook broke down mid-movement, collapsing to the floor, gasping. Jimin ran to him, dropped beside him, hands grabbing at his sweat-soaked shirt. You can't keep doing this, Jimin whispered, pressing his forehead to Jungkook's. You'll collapse before the show. I don't care, Jungkook choked out. Let them kill me, I won't let them erase me. Jimin grabbed his face. Look at me, don't give them that satisfaction. You die on your terms or not at all. Yoongi stood in the doorway. He's right, we have one shot. If even one beat is off, we lose everything. Hoseok came over, his voice gentler than usual. It's not just about pain, Jungkook, it's about precision. Make every scar speak. Jungkook nodded weakly. The day of the finale arrived, in a blur of quiet terror. They dressed in white, pure, ethereal, fragile. Their stylists didn't know. Their managers smiled like puppets. No one suspected anything. It was the perfect setup. But they weren't just dancers anymore. They were loaded weapons. The stadium was packed. The air buzzed with screams, glow sticks waving like waves of devotion. The lights dimmed. Then the music began. Not the track that had been planned. Not the digital pop anthem expected. A different beat. Older, slower. The first note of Jimin's brother's melody. The crowd didn't understand, at first. But then they moved. 7 dancers, 7 ghosts, 7 sins. Jungkook danced like the stage was on fire. Every movement a memory, every drop of sweat a truth spoken. Jimin floated like a knife in silk. Hoseok's choreography turned the stage into a confessional. Yoongi stood at the back, triggering the visual codes, overlaying images from the data shard. Faces, documents, corruption, abuse, surveillance. Live. The screen glitched. Then screamed. The crowd gasped, people stood, security rushed the stage. But it was too late. The message was out. Their dance became chaos, screams, gunfire. A flash. Then silence. And as the stage lights faded, the world held its breath. Because the swans didn't fall, they flew. Blood was on his palms, he didn't know whose. Jungkook stumbled backstage, the roar of the crowd still ringing in his ears like a ghost that wouldn't stop screaming. Lights flickered violently above him. The smoke machines had malfunctioned, pumping out thick, choking clouds that distorted every exit sign into a crimson blur. He couldn't breathe, not because of the smoke. Because of the silence. Jimin, he shouted, voice cracking. Jimin. No answer. His legs carried him past collapsed lighting rigs, overturned equipment cases, and a stagehand with eyes wide open, lifeless. Jungkook barely registered the bullet hole above the man's brow. All he saw was that Jimin wasn't there. Jimin, he screamed again. Someone grabbed his shoulder. He whirled and nearly struck out, until he saw Hoseok's face. Where is he? Jungkook rasped. They grabbed him, Hoseok gasped, blood trailing down his temple. Right after the last beat, black uniforms, tactical, they knew the set list. They were waiting for us. Jungkook's hands curled into fists. No, he was right next to me. I felt him, I saw. You didn't see the snatch team, Hoseok cut in. Because they didn't come from the stage. They came from underneath, subfloor hatch. Yoongi emerged from the opposite side, limping, clutching a shattered tablet. His face was pale with fury. They cut the stream just before the final reveal, he said. 3 seconds short. The world saw enough to start asking questions, but not enough to kill the machine. Jungkook felt something inside him shatter. We failed. No, Yoongi said. We exposed them. They're bleeding now, but they retaliated. Jungkook's heart was thudding in panic. Where are they taking him? Facility 7, Yoongi said grimly. It's not a prison, it's worse. I'm going after him. Yoongi stared at him. That's suicide. Jungkook stepped forward, eyes wild. Then I die trying. Hoseok grabbed his arm. Stop! You rush in now, you lose the only thing we gained. This story, the data, the movement. Jimin wouldn't want that. Jungkook shook him off. Don't tell me what Jimin would want. Yoongi sighed and pulled a small drive from his pocket. You want to save him? Then use this. It's keyed to the hidden stream backup. The final seconds. If we get this to the right hands, we make them untouchable. I'm not interested in being untouchable, Jungkook growled. I want him back. Yoongi's voice hardened. And if you go alone, you lose him anyway. You want war. Fine, but war is strategy, not rage. Hosok stepped between them. We do both. We send the footage out and we plan a retrieval. Jungkook's breathing slowed. He nodded once, but his fists didn't unclench. Somewhere across the city, Jimin opened his eyes. He was in a chair, metal cuffs biting into his wrists. The room was white, too white, sterile, empty. The hum of a fluorescent bulb above his head vibrated through his skull like a drill. Across from him sat her, Min Seojin. Her heels were crossed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Why go through all that trouble, Jimin? She asked softly, like a mother disappointed in her child. You could have had a clean, legendary exit. He stared at her through a swollen eye. Legends built on lies are still lies. She smiled. But they're profitable. You know what the fans are saying right now? He's an angel. He sacrificed everything for us. They're making murals, writing essays, selling out merch with your name covered in blood and feathers. Jimin said nothing. She leaned forward. You think truth saves people. It doesn't, it breaks them. But we build dreams, we build gods. I never wanted to be a god. No, she said, but the world needed you to be one. She stood and walked behind him, trailing a finger along the back of his neck. Do you know what happens now? Jimin exhaled slowly. You kill me. She chuckled. Kill you? No, darling, we erase you. The door opened. 2 men entered, one holding a syringe, the other a file folder. His memory will be altered, Seojin continued. His body rebranded, reintroduced in 2 years as an entirely new persona. We'll say the old Jimin was a victim of an accident, a beautiful, tragic story. He'll live, but he'll never be Jimin again. Jimin's fingers twitched in the cuffs. You won't get away with this. We already did. But just as the needle touched his skin, the lights went out. Total blackout. Screams echoed down the corridor, then gunfire. The door burst open, smoke flooded in. A figure moved through the chaos. Fast, silent, unstoppable. Jungkook. Mask on, eyes glowing. He didn't speak, he just moved. 2 guards went down before they could blink. Seojin reached for a panic button, but Jungkook shot her arm with a non-lethal bolt that knocked her into the wall. He reached Jimin, ripped off the restraints. Jimin blinked. How did you? I never stopped watching, Jungkook breathed, even when the world did. He pulled him up, arm around his waist, and together they ran into the darkness. Alarms wailed, the facility shook, sirens blared, and still they moved. By the time they reached the exit, a van was waiting. Yoongi at the wheel, Hosok in the back with a medkit. Jungkook threw open the doors, dragged Jimin in, and they vanished into the night. As the van roared down the highway, Jimin leaned against him, barely conscious, voice a whisper. You came for me. Jungkook looked down, brushing blood from his cheek. Always. And as the city burned behind them, its stories unraveling, its empire crumbling, Jimin closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his face. Because he knew. The performance wasn't over. The encore had just begun. Jungkook sat on the roof of a burnt-out broadcasting station, his knees drawn to his chest, face lit only by the flickering light of his phone. The screen was filled with flames, not literal ones, but the virtual inferno of the internet losing its collective mind. Millions of views, millions of shares, news outlets scrambling, influencers backtracking, CEOs issuing trembling statements. Odette's revenge was trending in every country. He didn't smile. He couldn't. His chest felt like something was trying to break through his ribs, not victory, not relief. Grief. Behind him, the door creaked. He didn't turn. Jimin's voice was soft, almost hesitant. I didn't think it would feel like this. Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin walked over, sitting beside him with a quiet sigh. His face was pale, stitched at the temple. His wrists still bore the marks of the restraints from Facility 7. "They're scared now," he said. "That's what you wanted, right?" "No," Jungkook replied. "I didn't want them scared, I wanted them ruined." Jimin looked at him. "We've done that." Jungkook shook his head slowly. "Not yet." The door behind them opened again, louder this time. Yoongi entered, his coat soaked with rain. "They froze the CEO's assets," he said. "Interpol issued an inquiry. Half the investors have pulled out. 3 of the board members have already resigned. You know what that means." "They're going to run," Jimin said. "They're going to eat each other alive first," Yoongi corrected. "And when that happens, the real names will come out, the ones behind the curtain." Hoseok joined them next. His hands were stained with grease from the van's undercarriage, his clothes torn. He didn't care. No one did anymore. "They offered me a deal," he said flatly. "Someone from the old label said if I denounce the rest of you, they'll reinstate my name, give me back my channel, clear my history." Jimin's voice was barely a whisper. "What did you say?" Hoseok looked at him with tired eyes. "I said, fuck your deal. I'm not dancing for shadows anymore." Jungkook finally looked up. "They still think we want to go back." Yoongi sat against the rusted vent. "That's the thing. They think everyone's replaceable. That truth is a trend, that this will pass like every other scandal." "But this isn't a scandal," Jimin said. "It's a reckoning." They fell into silence again, broken only by the buzz of the world below them. The sirens, the screens, the city slowly waking up to a truth it was never meant to see. Then Hoseok asked the question that none of them wanted to voice. "What happens now?" Jungkook stood slowly. "We go deeper." Yoongi frowned. "What do you mean?" "They were never the only ones," Jungkook said. "Seo-jin wasn't the head. She was a link, there's more. Politicians, entertainment conglomerates, secret buyouts. We've shaken the tower, but it's still standing." Jimin grabbed his arm. "You're not thinking clearly. You're exhausted." "I'm alive," Jungkook said sharply, "and I'm not done." Yoongi lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "You want to destroy the system, but the system isn't just a building you can burn. It's a language, a habit, a myth people want to believe in." "Then we become the myth they fear," Jungkook said. "We give them something they can't sanitize." Down below, chaos bloomed. Fans rioted in front of the agencies. Journalists were dragged out of their homes. A beloved producer was found dead in his villa, suicide or silenced, no one could tell. An anonymous insider leaked audio of a boardroom call where executives discussed blackmail and body doubles like ordering coffee. The machine was eating itself. And in the middle of it, Jungkook sat on the edge of the world, preparing to burn it again. Later that night, they received a message. Encrypted, untraceable, sent to a dead server Jimin hadn't used in 5 years. It was a voice recording. A woman, elderly, calm, controlled. "You've made a mess, boys," she said. "An impressive one, I'll admit, but what you've done is not rebellion, it's desperation, and we've dealt with desperation before." A pause. "I knew your brother, Jimin. He screamed my name before he died. He begged for you. But I already had my sights on you. You were always the prettier one." Jimin's face drained of all color. The voice continued. "Odette was only the beginning. You're about to meet the real choreographer." Click. Jungkook's breath caught. "Who the fuck was that?" Yoongi answered, barely louder than a whisper. "Madame Wai." The name hit like a blade. The court case was broadcast live in 32 countries. Jimin watched from a hospital room overlooking the Han River, the IV line in his arm poolsing with antibiotics while his other hand clutched Jungkook. Jungkook's shoulder was wrapped in layers of gauze, the painkillers dulling the worst of it, but his eyes were wide open, focused, alive. Madame Wai stood trial with no makeup, no veil of control, no diamonds, just shackles and silence. Her empire collapsed like a stage set torn down after its final performance. CEO testimonies exposed offshore accounts, bribed politicians, erased artists, and manufacturing facilities where identities were built and sold like fashion. The public's fury wasn't just righteous, it was unstoppable. Hoseok testified first, then Yoongi, then Han Min, who stood shaking before the world and simply said, "They told me idols were magic, but real magic is telling the truth when it's dangerous." Jimin never took the stand. He didn't need to, because everything he had to say had already been said, in movement, in music, in blood spilled on a stage they once called home. The verdict came down. Life imprisonment. No parole. And yet, as she was led away, Madame Y turned once. Her eyes met Jimin's face on the screen. She smiled. Not with victory, but with something colder. "You think this ends with me," her lips mouthed. Jimin stood slowly, pulling the IV from his arm, ignoring the alarmed nurse rushing in. Jungkook followed, still in pain but refusing to leave his side. They walked out into the corridor together. Hoseok was there waiting. So was Yoongi. And at the end of the hallway, Seokjin. They'd found him weeks before, half-mad in a psychiatric facility buried beneath a fake name. The real Seokjin, scarred, quiet, but alive. He looked at them now, his voice hoarse. "They'll try again." "Let them," Jungkook said. "We're not afraid anymore." "You sure?" Seokjin asked, almost gently. "The world doesn't want truth. It wants heroes who smile and bleed on cue." Jimin stepped forward, reaching into his coat. He pulled out a flash drive. "What's that?" Hoseok asked. "A new performance," Jimin said. "No labels, no choreography, just truth." Jungkook tilted his head. "A documentary." Jimin shook his head. "A requiem." He looked at each of them. For those who never got out, for those who forgot their own names, for the kids dancing in their bedrooms, thinking fame is the answer to pain. Yoongi folded his arms. "And if they come for us again?" Jimin smiled. "Then we make noise louder than ever." The requiem released 6 weeks later. No title. Just their voices, their scars, their story. And at the end, 7 silhouettes walking away from the spotlight, not toward fame, but toward themselves. No idols. No gods. Just human. Jungkook and Jimin stood at the edge of the sea months later, shoes off, water biting at their ankles. The world had moved on as it always does, but it had remembered them. Not as perfect, not as fallen. As real. Jimin looked out over the horizon. "Do you miss it?" he asked. Jungkook didn't answer right away. Then softly, "I miss believing it was pure." Jimin nodded, "But we made it something honest." Jungkook turned to him, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "You kept your promise." Jimin smiled, leaning into the touch. "I told you I'd keep you breathing." "And now," Jungkook whispered. "Now," Jimin said, resting his forehead against his, "we learn how to live." The waves broke around them, soft and endless. Above, the sky was wide and quiet. And for the first time in a long, long time, there was no music. Only peace. She was legend, not in the music world, but in the undercurrents of it. A myth passed between interns and burned-out idols. A woman behind the curtain, said to have trained dozens of stars who died mysteriously. Said to have founded the agency that became their label's parent company. Said to know how to erase a life with a whisper. And she was real. "She just declared war," Hoseok said. "No," Jungkook murmured. "She just invited us into the real performance." Outside, Seoul braced for another storm. Inside, 7 renegade idols prepared to take their final bow. But not before they burned the director's chair to ashes.